It struck me so much that I think a lot of people who come through the service don't, uh, they're not willing to share that.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. I have Nick Petrie, best-selling and award-winning author. Nick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for doing this. And I know we're going to kind of kick it off. You said you read one of my blog posts.
I did. I was you in it. You talk about it's on your website for those who haven't seen it, and you talk about sort of the physical injuries you sustained in the service and the kind of the mental and emotional components to that. And it struck me so much that I think a lot of people who come through the service don't, uh, they're not willing to share that with people. And I think it's so helpful to everybody who is going through something similar to realize that you're not alone in this.
Right.
So I just wanted to tell you how impressed I was, but with just committing that to the screen is something I don't think many people would have done.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think like we were talking kind of offline. I think the biggest part is admitting that you need help. That's the biggest hurdle to overcome is admitting that to yourself. Because once you admit it to yourself, then there are avenues of getting help out there, and that's what I did. Was like, I needed help. So the minute I actually admitted to myself that I needed help, I went to the VA and I said, I have this problem. This is what I'm feeling. And they said, okay, we're going to get you set up with this, this, and this. And then next thing I knew, I had appointments to talk to professionals and they were there to give me the help that I needed. And then that feeling of being alone and feeling like I'm the only one with this problem just went away because then I had people that were checking in on me and the system worked. It doesn't work perfectly for everybody, but it worked. And I think that was kind of the beauty of it.
Well, yeah, it's a funny thing. So I write this series about a Marine Corps veteran, and I was never in the service. I'm not a veteran myself, but in the first book especially is when he is really grappling with post-traumatic stress, and I learned about it from talking with vets who'd come back after the surge, about a week or so before the book was going to come out, I had this huge sort of surge of imposter syndrome
Mm,
because I'm not a veteran. Who am I to be writing about this stuff? I've
sure.
never seen combat. And the I think it's like what must be happening with you, which is that people saw it and saw themselves in that character.
Yeah.
And I get messages on a regular basis, Facebook, you know, Twitter, whatever, from guys who said I I I I thought I was going crazy, right? I didn't know there was something wrong with me. I thought I was just nuts. And now I know, it's like now you take steps to solve it. I think it's so powerful that the talking about it. I mean, that's really, um, for post-traumatic stress, especially, like that is the path
Mhm.
out, is to start to talk about it with people who've had a similar experience to you. That's the only way to kind of reprogram your brain.
And what you were saying earlier is, in the military, we're told there's a lot of suck it up, be tough. We got to keep moving. Like there's no quit. That's really ingrained in everybody. So then when it comes to talking and it comes to getting help and maybe actually kind of quitting and shifting and doing something else, um, that admittance is really, really difficult because we're not used to that. We're used to no fail. We're used to working until it gets done. Like it can't break. There's people who rely on us. We're defenders of the Constitution. The American people depend on us for safety and security. So there's no quit. So in a way, you have to quit doing the normal and quit having the mind frame that you have and switch over to something else. And I think that's a huge part of getting help. And how does it feel to you though when somebody reaches out to you and connects with your book like that? And you get that imposter syndrome a little bit where you kind of question yourself, like, well, should I be doing this? Do I have the right to do this? But then somebody reaches out to you you kind of get that validation. How does that connect for you as a best-selling and award-winning author?
Well, I don't have that imposter syndrome about that particular topic anymore. I still have it about, being a writer in general most days. But yeah, there has been so much feedback on this particular topic, and so much gratitude coming from mostly men, but women too. The crazy thing is that, I mean, so I did an event on my first book tour, and at a library in a sort of an exurb south of town. And there were these two women in their 70s who came up to me at the end, and they were sisters, and they said, "We just want to thank you because our husbands were both in Vietnam, and your book helped us understand how to talk to them about that experience."
Mm.
And like enough of that stuff happens, and it's sort of like, so I there's some part of me that I've talked to enough vets, I've read enough, I've done enough research that I clearly I got something right
Yeah.
about this. So it's actually, I never thought that this would be a part of my life as a writer. This sort of ongoing conversation, and it's probably the best part of my life as a writer, to be honest with you, to know that something that you've written has made a difference to somebody, that has touched them in some way. Like that's the holy grail as far as I'm concerned.
I've heard a lot of people tell me that. I've actually heard it from some spouses and some daughters and some sons who have said, "I read a book from a veteran who wrote about his experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then I immediately learned how to talk to my father better, or my mother better, or my grandfather, or my uncle, or whatever better, because." They never, and if you think about it, they never got to talk to them about that side of things. But then
Right.
they read about it from someone else who kind of went through the same, and then it's like that epiphany, and then you bridge that connection. So for you as an author, getting to do that kind of unknowingly, because you just don't know that a book's going to necessarily do that. That connection is gold.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I have to sort of be a little careful about how I think about it. It's really important to me not to get any ego about it, but
Sure.
just to feel like it's about being of service, as my character often talks about it. It's being useful in
Hmm.
the world, and that's important to me. And that's, to me, that's sort of the like I said, sort of the unexpected gift of this. And it's why, so now I'm 8 books in
Hmm.
to this series, and it's why the series has continued in the way it has, because learning early on that you post-traumatic stress doesn't go away. The war never leaves you.
Hmm.
You just learn how to live with it, right? You learn how to
Yeah.
live with that like an old friend. And so that is Peter Ash, who's my protagonist. That is his path from book to book. Is he is making every book he makes a little forward progress, or sometimes he falls back. He has a sort of a relapse.
Mm. It's
Um,
reality.
well, it is reality. It is reality. And again, I know so many folks who've been through this and have had um, really kind of intense emotional conversations, because I'm a safe person, because I'm not part of their service family, right? I'm not, I wasn't in their unit.
Hmm.
So they don't have to sort of project that kind of, tough guy
Yeah.
strength, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not part of the family that they were born into or that they married into. So they don't have to, they can really, sort of say what they think and say what they feel. It's kind of amazing, and that's kind of how I got into this. Is I had clients who were coming home after the surge, these young men and women who, some of whom were, awfully beat up, and some of whom were just very quiet. Um, and they were never going to see me again, because I was a guy who was I was, at the time, I was a home inspector. So you'd hire me to come look at the house you were buying for 3 or 4 hours, and I'd be down in the basement explaining, how to take care of the furnace or whatever, and our conversation would just begin, and people would tell me the most astonishing things. And I think for any writer, the ability to uh, sort of be quiet and listen is really the primary skill, because we write about people,
Mhm.
most of us. I mean, that's to me, that's the goal, is to have these characters come alive on the page.
Right.
Um, and for me, the characters that I write about are deeply rooted in real people and in real experiences.
So let's rewind like all the way back to when you were a home inspector, you were a carpenter, you're in remodeling. When did the writing bug catch you and you said, "Okay, I'm going to jump into this"?
Oh, long before that, I when I was in high school, I worked on the student newspaper. And my senior year, I was the editor of the paper. And because I was the editor, I got to basically assign myself anything I wanted. And so I wrote an 8-part soap opera, basically, starring my friends and enemies in school. And people would stop me in the hallway when the paper came out to say, oh boy, that was really funny, or oh, I really like this part. And the fact that you could write something and have an effect on people, um, that was very powerful for me. And so I went to college. I studied American culture and creative writing at Michigan, and I won an award for a short story when I was there. And I wrote I wrote my first novel by the time I was 24, I think. Um, but I had a life. I had to make a living. I'm even now, I'm not a particularly fast writer. And it took me, essentially 25 years and 3 novels and God knows how many short stories to basically learn how to tell a story well enough for that first book to get published. So, and that book became The Drifter, and I was 44, I think, um, uh, when I signed the papers with my publisher. So, as a friend of mine says, I am the classic 25-year overnight success story.
So you're 8 books in. Um, how has your writing process changed from book one to book 8?
That's a great question, actually. I was just thinking about this the other day. Um, Back when I was running a business and also trying to write a book, um, I sort of squeezed it into whatever time I had, and I always did work that had a real seasonal component. I live in Wisconsin, and so construction in Wisconsin slows down enormously in the wintertime. Home inspection, which is what I did for the previous 15 years, really slows down. So there's twice as much work in June as there is in December.
Hmm.
And so I really made use of that slow time. And even when it was busy, it was my business, so I could schedule time. And I'd make sure I had an hour between appointments, and I would stop and get a cup of coffee. I knew where every coffee shop was in 6 counties. Stop and get a cup of coffee and plug in my laptop and just work as fast as I possibly could to get as much done as I possibly could. And I did that really through the first 4 books. Um, and then finally, they paid me enough to sort of hang up my home inspector's hat and be a full-time writer. And that was actually a really challenging time. And I now know that that's true of anybody in the arts, right? If you're a painter or a sculptor or a playwright or an actor even, right? When you suddenly can make your living at it, um, your relationship to it can change, right? So now my writing is responsible for paying my mortgage, and that's a fundamentally different relationship. The goal was always sort of to play and have fun, and it became very serious
Hmm.
um, when it's your livelihood. And so I am now really trying to remember that I used to do this just for fun, and that's why I did without getting paid for 25 years.
Yeah.
And that it's a much better place to work from, to remind yourself, to remember that it's just play, that you're just essentially a kid telling stories. So I started out like that, and then I became a professional, quote unquote. And now I'm trying to be an amateur again. I'm trying to sort of forget everything sort of that I've learned and to just sort of, go back to pure fun. So it's I think if you don't keep learning in whatever you're doing, you might as well just start dying.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to get better at what I do. Every book is a new set of challenges that I give myself, and then there are challenges inherent in the book as well. But that's just my approach to life.
Yeah. Don Bentley told me, he said, write and work full time until you absolutely can't do both anymore, and then hang it up because of what you said right there. Like, your relationship to it is going to change when that's what's going to pay your mortgage, as opposed to your 9 to 5s paying your mortgage. And that's a level of security that you can relax with. The minute you change it over and the keyboard is what's paying the bills, there's a different relationship to it, and it changes. That dynamic changes.
Yeah, Don and I have had a lot of conversations about this actually. Don is a good friend, and we get on the phone every month or so and drink a beer and talk for a
Yeah.
couple hours. He's a super smart guy, a super talented
Yeah, he
writer,
is.
and what he has done has been so impressive to me. The
Mhm.
amount of work he has made. Um, he's a hell of a guy.
I'm looking forward to what he does with the Mitch Rapp series. I think he's
Oh,
really
me
got,
too.
man, I'm
Me
excited about that.
Me too. Well, he really killed it with the Clancy stuff,
He
and
did.
I think Mitch Rapp is a as an even better fit for kind of his general approach. So
Hmm.
it's going to be super interesting
Yeah, I think so
to
too.
see what happens.
So, for you as an established writer now, how have you seen the publishing industry change since you first published that first book?
Well, I don't know how much the industry has changed, or if it's my perception of the industry. Um, I mean, depending on who you talk to, nobody reads anymore, and publishing is dying, and we're all going to be slaves to our smartphones, et cetera, et cetera. And there's definitely some truth to that. I mean, it used to be in the 70s, you could make as much as a rock star if you were Peter Benchley writing Jaws. I read a great piece not too long ago where he made $60 million in a year. So like that is not ever
It's a
going to
lot.
happen again.
Yeah.
There are so many fewer. It's not even that there are fewer readers; it's that there's more to do, right?
Hmm.
In 1976, most people didn't have cable,
Yeah.
right? Now we have, if you have cable, you've got a couple hundred channels, and you've got all the stuff to stream, and you have games on your phone and social media and uh, you know the Xbox, and I mean there's
Yeah.
so much
Yes.
competing for attention, and so I it's books are not where they were in the culture.
Hmm.
I think that's pretty undeniable. But there are still really passionate readers out there, and
Yes.
it's possible to participate in the culture and to make a living doing this. I mean, I'm not getting rich. I'm not gonna retire and buy an island anytime soon. There are, John Grisham is certainly doing well, and Stephen King is doing well, but
Hmm.
most of us are in the middle, and feel very lucky that I can actually make a living at this. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how things progress going forward. I think there's been some stuff about how we're kind of at screen saturation, and I think COVID had that effect on a lot of people. If you're on Zoom all day for work, what you want to unplug, you want to lay down and
Yeah.
read a book,
Hmm.
and I think that's a real phenomenon. I think it's only going to continue because we're only going to get more plugged in. Zoom meetings have not stopped with COVID,
No.
so it's I don't know. It's an interesting time to be a writer. I do sometimes when I'm feeling pessimistic, I wish I had started um, before the first iPhone. I think about people whose careers got established in the early aughts, before that first iPhone came out. Like that was just a fundamentally different world. And I think about writers who are coming in after me, who are coming into a world where, streaming is, such a huge deal now. And 5 years ago, sure, we could watch, but not the same way we do now. Excuse me, I have to. I actually got COVID for Christmas, and I'm still coughing it up here. I
The
apologize.
worst gift.
Yes, yes.
So let's talk about the new book that's coming out, the price you pay. And I want to read one of the early editorial reviews because I think it's just a slam dunk home run for anybody who's listening. This is huge. This is praise for the Peter Ash series by Lee Child. It says a lot of characters get compared to my own Jack Reacher, but Peter Ash is the real deal. That's a huge, huge endorsement. How's that feel? How's it ring in your head?
Well, it's a huge compliment because I'm a giant fan of those books, that series. What Lee has accomplished to me is monumental.
Hmm.
The other thing that made it especially sweet is how it happened, which is that he was being interviewed for a radio show, and the interviewer said, "So, what are you reading now?" And he said, "Oh, I'm reading this book by this guy, Nick Petrie. He's English. You wouldn't know that to read Jack Reacher, but Lee is English, and I'm reading this book by a guy named Nick Petrie, and it's called The Drifter, and I really liked it. And everything sort of came out of that. And so, like, nobody called him up and said, "Hey, would you read this and give us a blurb?" He just he found the book as a fan, and to me that means a lot.
So tell me a spoiler free kind of teaser of what the price you pay is.
All right. I've been practicing about this because I'm not really great at the whole elevator pitch. So Peter Ash is a Marine Corps combat veteran, still reckoning with the consequences of his years at war. His best friend is a retired career criminal named Lewis, and in The Price You Pay, Lewis's criminal past comes back to haunt him. He learns that a member of his old crew is in trouble, and he asks Peter to drive north into a blizzard to rescue the man. When they find blood on the snow and a smoldering cabin, they know things are bad. When they learn that someone has stolen a dozen notebooks filled with the details of Lewis's criminal life, they realize the situation has gotten much, much worse. So to save Lewis's family, he and Peter must step into the criminal underworld that Lewis thought he had left behind. So that's kind of that was sort of that's how it begins, essentially.
So big focus on crime. What kind of research did you do or have you done for this series and for this book in particular?
Actually, this book is one of my less research heavy books. I always do a lot of reading, and I'm just interested in it. But this is sort of an old school crime novel. If this is not computer crime, nobody's stealing over the internet per se, which is how a lot of modern criminals make their living, unless you're just sticking people up on the street. Um, but so I really thought about kind of, uh, and so Lewis has been a character since the very first book in the series, and I really wanted to think about sort of what Lewis's life of crime had been, and I kind of knew what some of the details were, and I had done a little bit of talking about that in the series, but not very much. And so for me, the challenge was to sort of figure out a way to have it be sort of coherent and to sort of have a particular flavor to it um, that let you see kind of what a dangerous man Lewis really is, but also what's behind that, what's inside of it. You get a lot more of Lewis in this book than in anything else I've written. You get to really see what's in Lewis's heart, which was a really interesting thing to. 'Cause I didn't really know. I just started to sort of write from his point of view, and it just sort of came out. And that to me, that was one of the most rewarding things about writing this book was that Lewis is such a fan favorite, and people have been asking me to write a book about Lewis for really since the very beginning. And so, to sort of get to deliver that was really lovely.
So 8 books in, this book's about to come out. Are there other things? Have you ever thought about exploring? Like Mark Greaney just recently kind of broke away from the Gray Man and started another little series. Has that ever came across your desk as a thought to do?
Yeah, actually, I've been trying to write a standalone for a couple of years, and every time I have a conversation with my editor, they're like, "No, we really like this last Peter Ash book. We really would rather see, another Peter Ash book." And this is again one of the downsides of publishing is that you have control over very little
Hmm.
as a writer. Um, and so, but this book actually took a lot out of me. Ended up throwing out the first 5 months worth of work, and so blew through my deadline. It's why it's been a year without a book for
Wow.
me, which is also semi-traumatic. Um, and to get this book out the door, I ended up doing a really heavy-duty final edit through it. Um, and I just said, I just need a break. So I'm actually now two-thirds of the way through a standalone about an ex-con whose brother is killed in rural Wisconsin. So that's what I was working on today, and I'm super excited about it. Um, and now I just have to figure out how it ends.
Isn't that kind of the kicker? I think that's been the kicker in a lot of the stuff I've worked on is like, yeah, man, story's so good, but like you want to end it right because you don't want to
Yes,
end it to where people
yes,
go, okay, yeah. I mean, it ended how I expected it to, or it was a little not as quite as dramatic as you wanted. I think that's always the for me that's always the pressure situation is like you got to end it with that that punch that makes them go, ooh, I can't wait for the next one.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the challenge, right? And especially when you're writing a series, people have a set of expectations now, 8 books in. So you want to both satisfy and thwart those expectations at the same time, which for me gets harder with every book because well, I've done this and I've done that, and um, it's just I thought it would get easier, and
Yeah.
it has not gotten easier. I was in an elevator with Harlan Coben years ago, and I was struggling with my third book, and I said, "Oh, just please tell me it gets easier." And he just laughed and he said, "Not if you're doing it right." And
Okay.
like I have carried that with me for I don't know what it is. It's been 6 years probably. Um, just this idea that like even for somebody as successful and prolific as Harlan Coben, like it's not getting any easier. So I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just struggling the way every writer struggles sometimes.
So, book number 8, The Price You Pay, is coming out. We're going to put this out around the same time so people can go pick it up now. But 8 books in, do you have a vision for the future? And you've said Peter Ash has kind of changed and taken step forwards and step backs throughout these 8 books. Um, how far into the future of Peter Ash are you looking?
I can't ever see past the book I'm working on.
Okay.
I think if I were a different kind of writer, if I were somebody who outlined, I might be able to think a little farther ahead. Um, I know Mark Greaney has told me that he thinks in 5 book arcs, which to me is kind of astonishing, although his
Yeah.
arcs are very simple, right? So the Gray Man books, the first 5 books is court gentry is being hunted by the CIA, and by the end, he's back in. And then the next 5 books, he's in the CIA until he gets kicked out and is hunted again. So it's a very simple structure, but it does kind of help you see how things go.
Hmm.
Um, for me, I'm just trying to find the next thing that I'm interested in. And a lot of these books are written about a social issue that I kind of can't let go of. And that's why I started writing about veterans to begin with, because I had all these customers who I was like, I what's life like when you get home from war? And I kept asking these questions. I kept talking to people. But so I wrote a book about that was set in Colorado right after cannabis became legal, because I was really curious what that would look like, and
Hmm.
what the sort of what the crime implications might be. I wrote a book about race and class set in Memphis. I wrote a book about sort of rogue technology. So all the things that sort of interest me, and so I'm always kind of looking for that next thing. I mean, I don't know what the arc is. Peter might get better, he might get worse. It depends on kind of how what I'm trying to do with him, and honestly, it's where's my head right now.
Yeah.
If I'm full of despair about the American future, Peter may have a rough book or two.
Yeah.
Or if I decide I really need to find my internal optimism, I might the goal maybe would just to be to write something that was pure fun,
Yeah.
right? That didn't have that heaviness to it. Peter, Peter in a heist novel, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
That wasn't quite as heavy. So it's I've got a card file full of ideas that I just something pops into my head. I grab an index card, I scribble it down, and I put it away where I can't look at it again. And then when the time comes to write something new, I pull them out, and I'm like, no, 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 maybe, no, no, maybe that one, and I just sort of try to find a place to start. I try to find sort of a situation, and it goes from there.
What is your maybe your singular piece of advice for an aspiring author who's trying to do what you do and get started? What's your kind of that motivational advice for them?
I would tell them what I told Don Bentley before he got published, which was don't give up. I wrote 3 books I couldn't get published before I wrote a book that was nominated for 5 awards and became a national bestseller. Um, I, to me, the only difference between a published author and an unpublished author is uh, how long you've been doing it. And you should absolutely read that. When I hear somebody say, "Oh, I'm writing a book," and I say, "Well, what do you read?" And, "Oh, well, I don't really read." So that is how you learn to be a writer, is by
Mm-hmm.
reading.
Oh yeah.
Those are your teachers. So that's probably my second piece of advice: is read writers who are better than you, because that is how you learn. But it's all about persistence, and it's
Yeah.
all about sort of learning to be okay with that sort of self-doubt and uncertainty that is just part of this business. And when you're 8 books in, I'm it's still full of self-doubt and uncertainty. I have a friend who is working on her 6th book in a series, and she's a fantastic writer. And her publisher just said, we think this should be the last book.
Oh.
Just because, right? She's won awards. She it you know so she has to find her way forward, unfortunately that is not. I mean, I could give you probably a dozen names that are in that boat. um
Well,
so
Kyle Mills.
well, yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
you just all you can do is the best you can do, right?
Yeah. Well,
um
Kyle was a little
so
different because I guess he kind of came to the table and said, "I think my run is done. I think I've done what I could with Mitch Rapp,
well,
and
yeah,
it's
so his that was
time."
voluntary.
Yeah, it was a little
But
more voluntary.
yeah, but still, how many Peter Ash novels do I have? Actually, the funny thing about writing something different is realizing how much I love those characters,
Hmm.
and how much I love those stories, and how much I love sort of the form of a Peter Ash novel. Um, and I sort of thought, well, maybe I'll write 8 books and that'll be it. And now I'm like, no, I'm like, I might. I mean, I certainly have more standalones that I'd like to write, but I can't imagine not coming back to Peter Ash again and again and again. So it's an interesting story, but you only have so much control, right?
Yeah,
You can't phone it in. You can't. Um, you really have to give it your all every time, right? What do the Navy SEALs do? The Navy SEALs say every day is selection day.
yeah, yeah,
That's kind of how you have to approach life as a writer. Is it's like, am I going to be the person I want to be today?
yeah.
So I don't know. It's a fascinating thing, and it requires so much willpower. Going to a job, somebody's expecting you, they're giving you a paycheck. You have coworkers, you have a boss. Um, you can do that on automatic pilot. You can't be a writer on automatic pilot, especially if you have a day job. I mean, it takes constant sort
Yeah.
of internal fortitude to say, I'm not going to watch this great series tonight. I'm gonna try to write another chapter, or I'm not going to go to that party because I have to get up at 5 to get my 500 words before I go off to work.
Yep.
You really have to want it.
Yeah, it's a level of discipline, I think. Just as much so, I imagine if I was sitting at home and I was a full-time writer and I could sleep in till 9 o'clock in the morning, and then my job for the day was to write some words, and I had a deadline in the future. For someone without the self-control, it would be really easy to say, I got a couple of months, you know.
Right.
It would be so much easier to say that and kind of kick the can down the road, type a little, only 300 words today, no big deal. I got 3 months still, as opposed to now I'm working 9 to 5. I have 40 plus hours a week. I have the podcast that I do. So squeezing in a couple hundred words a day is my goal, just to sit down and hammer on the keyboard.
Right, and move the story forward. There's a
Hmm.
what's the expression? If you want something done, ask a busy person. It's
Yeah.
almost easier to get more done when you are constantly moving. That's, to
Yeah.
me, one of the challenges of being a full-time writer, is it is easier to sort of say, well, maybe I'll just read the paper, and I'll just have another cup of coffee. Like, it's so easy to do that. And
Hmm.
and I hit this point not long ago where I'm just tired of wasting time. I had a year without a book. It drove me nuts. And it also means a year without a book is also a year without a paycheck, by the way. So,
Yeah.
it's quite motivating. And I just like, I don't know, I'm in my mid 50s. Nobody is guaranteed a tomorrow. I have a family member who just had a terrible health scare over the holidays.
Mm.
My dad passed away this year. It's like
Oh,
I am thinking a lot about my mortality,
yeah.
and what do I want to accomplish before I can't do this anymore. I mean, I could have a stroke next week, and then my days as a writer are done.
It's very true.
Uh,
That's very true.
so the goal is to get up every day and to do some work you're proud of.
Well, before I let you go, I got one question for you from Jeff Circles, the dossier, which I know you're familiar with.
Oh
Jeff's
yeah.
reached out to you before. Here's his question. He says, "There's a lot that can be said about publishing today from the writer's perspective, whether it's how agents work, how editors handle manuscripts, or how publishers support authors. What is one thing you would like to see done differently?"
Oh, I think it's a great question, and I don't know that I have a great answer. Because you're asking me to do some wishful thinking, and for me, if you want to live in the real world, it doesn't do me any good to wish that my publisher would spend a little more money
Hmm.
on publicity, right? Or that I don't know, more, Peter Ash would sell to more territories overseas or whatever. Because the truth is, none of that is in my power, really. What's in my power as a writer is to write the very best book that I can, and to write something that feels true to who I am and to how I want to live in the world. And at a certain point, you send it off. And that doesn't mean I'm not doing podcasts to try to get the word out. That doesn't mean I'm not going on book tour. I'm not sitting on my laurels just hoping. But you can't, the world is what it is, and all you can do is sort of try to push forward. And publishing has evolved a lot. And we talked about this earlier, how they're just plain, there's more for people to do than there used to be, and I think that's just the reality. And uh, if I could abolish the smartphone, maybe that's something I would do.
Yeah, it
I,
sure
I
would help.
definitely have a I definitely have a love-hate relationship with my own phone. So,
So before I let you go, one last thing. Where can people go find more about you, find more about the Peter Ash novels, and stay in touch with you?
Well, the best way is to go to my website, which is nickpetrie.com, and sign up for my newsletter. So there'll be a pop-up that comes up. Just give me your email address. Those go out basically monthly. It's sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but you'll get little extra tidbits. There's a dog who's a character in the book, and a couple of years ago, I sent out this thing from the point of view of the dog. Little bits and pieces like that, little extras, and you'll also get more detail about book tour and where I'm going to be and where you can, listen to a podcast, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also on the socials, nick.petrie.author on Facebook and Instagram, underscore Nick Petrie underscore on the former Twitter. Um, I'm not a huge poster, but once a week, twice a week, three times a week, depending on how close I am to deadline.
Well, Nick, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking forward to opening the mailbox here in another couple of days when the book launches and I get my copy in my hand and check out this 8th Peter Ash novel, excuse me. And I wish you the best of luck, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the conversation. You really had some great questions. Thanks so much.